From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring all sport news.
From the studios of Atlantic Television Network here in Port Harcourt, this is ATN International News for 6th of August 2024. First, the headlines. In Niger, United States hands over last military base to government. In the United States, Vice President Harris to introduce running mate. In Israel, hundreds celebrate birthday of captive child. And in Belgium, EU sanctions Belarus officials for rights violation. Deep down in Australia, government rebukes Iranian ambassador. Chad's military was responsible for the deaths of several detainees arrested following protests in October 2022, Human Rights Watch has said on Tuesday. At least 4 people died en route to Korotoro prisons and 6 others died there, and it was not clear whether another man died, the group said in its report, adding that the real toll was likely much higher. At the time, security forces in the Central African nation fired live ammunition, killing at least 60 people during demonstrations against interim leader Mahamat Déby Itno's 2-year extension of power. The unrest was unprecedented in Chad, which saw little public dissent during the regime of Déby Itno's father, who ruled for more than 3 decades until his assassination in 2021. Hundreds were detained and taken to Korotoro, about 600 kilometers from N'Djamena, the capital. Human rights, unlawful detentions, ill treatment at the prisons, and deaths in custody. The Chadian government must act decisively to address the impunity for these abuses, said Lewis Mudge, Central African Director at Human Rights Watch, in a statement. Detainees were unlawfully detained, mistreated, and denied basic supplies during the 2 to 3 day transit to the prison, the report said. Some died along the way. The bodies of those who died were thrown out of the trunks, said a former detainee whose name was not released, and quoted in the report. Korotoro prison operates with military oversight. According to the report, its day-to-day administration was delegated to prisoners having links to the militant group Boko Haram, who punished and beat other detainees. At least hundreds were chained up with iron rods attached to their ankles for up to several weeks, the report said. Some detainees were subjected to prolonged solitary confinement, a form of torture, and forced labor. U.S. handed over its last military base in Niger, one of the two crucial hubs for American counter-terrorism operations in the country, to local authorities. The U.S. Department of Defense and Niger's Ministry of Defense announced in a joint statement on Monday. The handing over of Air Base 201 in the city of Agadez came after the U.S. troops withdrew earlier this month from Air Base 101, a small drone base in Niger's capital of Niamey. United States troops have until September the 15th to leave the Sahel country following an agreement with Nigerian authorities. There are about 2,000 American soldiers who remain in Niger, largely for administrative duties related to the withdrawal, according to Sabrina Singh, the Pentagon spokeswoman. They are located at the U.S. Embassy. In March, Niger's ruling junta ended an agreement that allowed United States troops to operate in the West African country. A few months later, officials of the two countries announced in a joint statement that United States troops would complete their withdrawal by the middle of September. Niger has been seen as one of the last countries and nations in the restive region that Western nations could partner with to beat back growing jihadi insurgencies. The United States and France have more than 2,500 military personnel in the region, and until recently, and together with other European countries, had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in military assistance and training. In recent months, Niger had pulled away from its Western partners, turning instead to Russia for security. In April, Russian military trainers arrived in Niger to reinforce the country's air defenses. Niger's ouster of American troops following a coup last year has broad ramifications for the United States because it is forcing troops to abandon the critical base that was used for counter-terrorism missions in the Sahel, a vast region south of the Sahara Desert, where groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State group operate. One of those groups, Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wa al-Muslimin, known as JNIM, is active in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and is looking to expand into Benin and Togo. Federal prosecutors in Switzerland said on Monday that they have found Glencore International units criminally liable and ordered the commodities giant to pay over $150 million in fines and compensation after ending a probe of bribery in connection with Congo's mining industry over a decade ago. The Swiss Attorney General's office said that Glencore's International AG failed to take adequate measures to prevent bribery of a Congolese public official by a business partner over his purchase in 2011 of minority stakes in two companies from Central African countries' state mining company. Glencore did not admit to the findings but said it would not appeal. The Switzerland-based company said that the Attorney General's office did not find any company's employees knew of the bribery by a business partner, nor did Glencore benefit financially from the partner's conduct. Glencore International was handed a fine of 2 million Swiss francs and ordered to pay a compensation claim of $150 million in connection with the estimated benefit to the partner. Glencore and other international commodities companies regularly face scrutiny and criticism from non-governmental groups and authorities over the tactics they use to win contracts and businesses in developed countries with large amounts of oil, diamonds, minerals, and other coveted natural resources. Glencore's already reached a deal in 2022 with Congo's government to pay $180 million over bribery allegations spanning from 2007 to 2018. Chairman Kalidas Madhavpedi said that Glencore has invested heavily to improve its ethics and compliance program and noted that two independent compliance monitors who have a 3-year term under a mandate in resolution with the U.S. Department of Justice, began their work in the middle of last year. Tunisian President Kais Saied filed papers on Monday to run in the October presidential elections, where he is expected to face little competition as potential challengers have been imprisoned during his first term. Saied submitted 242,224 signatures from registered voters to qualify for inclusion on the October 6 ballot in the North African nation. 4 other candidates have gathered signatures to run, including Abir Musa, a right-wing critic of the president who has been behind bars since she staged a protest outside his residence last year. Her attorneys said that they filed her paperwork on Sunday. Tunisia will publish a complete list of candidates by Saturday. The Independent High Authority for Elections requires candidates gather 10,000 signatures to appear on ballots. Political participation has waned in Tunisia since the country's longtime dictator Zine al-Abidine Ben Ali was overthrown in 2011. Last year's local election saw a turnout of 11%. Vice President Kamala Harris will introduce her new running mate at a rally on Tuesday evening in Philadelphia, but with the event mere hours away, her choice remains a mystery. In recent days, she has zeroed in on a trio of potential finalists: Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. But decisions beyond that aren't yet publicly known. Harris's campaign planned to make the announcement via video message before the rally, though the exact filming remains unclear, according to a person involved in the planning who spoke on condition of anonymity to detail discussions occurring behind closed doors. Doing so would be similar to how then candidate Joe Biden revealed Harris as his vice presidential choice during the pandemic-marred presidential race of 2020. It will mark another major milestone in the barely 2 weeks since Vice President moved to take over the top of the Democratic ticket heading into November's elections. She has been scrambling to build out a campaign since then and to breathe new life into the Democratic race against Republican Donald Trump. Harris, the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and her number 2 pick are set to appear together for an evening rally in Philadelphia, recalling that a joint 2020 appearance by Biden and Harris in Washington, Delaware, and likewise in 2016 newly scheduled running mate Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia appeared with Hillary Clinton in Miami. After Tuesday's trip to Pennsylvania, Harris and her running mate will spend the next 5 days flying thousands of miles around the country, touring clinical battlegrounds. They'll visit Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Detroit on Wednesday, but a planned stop in Savannah, Georgia. A planned stop in Savannah, Georgia was postponed due to Tropical Storm Debbie's effects, and rain associated with it could also append a scheduled stop in Durham, North Carolina. Later in the week, Harris and her number 2 will head to Phoenix and Las Vegas. Deputy Sheriff who fatally shot Sonia Macy in her Illinois home last month said that he believed that when he took the black woman who called 911 for help unexpectedly, said that, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," that she intentionally intended deadly harm, according to the deputy's field report released Monday. I interpret this to mean that she was going to kill me, Grayson wrote, adding that when he drew his pistol and Macy ducked behind the counter that separated them, he moved around the obstacle, fearing that she was going to grab a weapon. Grayson, a 30-year-old Sangamon County Sheriff's deputy, faces first-degree murder, aggravated battery, and official misconduct. 36-year-old Springfield woman. On the July 6th, which was drawn nationwide protests over the killing of black people by police in their homes, Grayson has pleaded not guilty. His attorney, Daniel Foles, declined to comment on Monday. Macy's family has called for resignation of Sheriff Jack Campbell, who has refused to step down, arguing that problems in Grayson's past should have precluded the law enforcement assignment. The family has hired civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who did not immediately respond to questions and requests for comments by phone, email, or SMS. Colorado funeral home owners who allegedly stored 190 decaying bodies and sent grieving families fake ashes were ordered by a judge to pay $950 million to the victim's relative in a civil case. The attorney announced Monday that the judgment is unlikely to be paid out since the owners, John and Carrie Halford, have been in financial trouble. For years. They also face hundreds of criminal charges in separate state and federal cases, including abuse of corpse and allegations they took $130,000 from families for cremations and burials they never provided. That leaves the nearly $1 billion sum largely symbolic of an emotional devastation wreaked on family members who learned the remains of their mothers, fathers, and children weren't in the ashes they ceremonially spread and ditched and clutched tight, but were instead a decaying in a bug-infested building. Dozens of family members have received similar news as the 190 bodies have been identified, shattering their grieving process. Many are still picking up the pieces, haunted by nightmares of what their decomposing family members may have looked like, or burdened by guilt that they had let a loved one down. While the victims and the class action attorney, Andrew Swan, understood from the onset that it was unlikely families would receive any financial compensation, part of the hope that was to haul the Hallifords into court and demand answers. The civil lawsuit lists over 100 family members, but has been left open in case other victims come forward, since 190 total bodies were discovered in the funeral homes. A facility in Penrose, southwest of the company's office in Colorado Springs, John Halford is being represented by the Public Defender's Office, which does not comment on cases. Carrie Halford's attorney, Michael Stosniski, was not immediately available for comments. The case helped spur Colorado lawmakers to pass sweeping regulations on the funeral home industry in the state, which grievously had the laxest rules in the nation. Tropical storm Debbie moved menacingly into some of America's most historic southern cities and was expected to bring prolonged downpours and flooding throughout the day. After slamming into Florida and prompting the rescue of hundreds from flooded homes, record-setting rain from the storm that killed at least 5 people on Monday was caused by flash flooding, which up to 30 inches possible in some areas, the National Hurricane Center said. Hunker down, Van Johnson, the mayor of Savannah, Georgia, told residents in a social media live stream Monday night, expect that it will be a rough night on Tuesday, and he said that flash flood warnings were issued in Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina, among other areas of coastal Georgia and Southern Carolina. Both Savannah and Charleston announced curfews Monday night into Tuesday. In South Carolina, Charleston's county interim emergency director Ben Webster called Debbie a historic and potentially unprecedented event those 3 times in a second briefing Monday. In addition to the curfew, the city of Charleston's emergency plan includes sandbags for residents, opening parking garages so residents can park their cars above floodwaters, and an online mapping system that shows which roads are closed due to flooding. In Edisto Beach, South Carolina, a tornado touched down on Monday night, damaging trees, homes, and taking down power lines. The collecting Colleton County Sheriff's Office said on social media that no injuries were immediately reported. Officials have said the National Weather Service continues issuing tornado warnings well into Monday night for parts of the state, including in the island town of Hilton Head. Debbie made landfall along the Gulf Coast of Florida early Monday as a Category 1 hurricane. It has weakened to a tropical storm, and is moving slowly, drenching and bringing areas of catastrophic flooding across the portions of eastern Georgia, the coastal plain of South Carolina, and southeast North Carolina through Wednesday. Venezuela's top prosecutor on Monday announced a criminal investigation against the opposition's presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez and his leader Maria Corina Machado over their call on the armed forces to abandon their support for President Nicolas Maduro and to stop repressing demonstrators. Attorney General Tariq William Saab statement led the investigation directly to a written appeal that the 2 members of the opposition sent hours earlier about Maduro and the demonstrators who have come out in force to defend their votes in the July 28 elections. Saab, in a written announcement posted on the social media site X, said that the duo falsely announced a winner of the presidential election other than the one proclaimed by National Electoral Council, the only body qualified to do so, and they openly incited police and military officials to disobey the law. Gonzalez's and Machado's written appeal shows the alleged commission of various crimes, including usurpation of functions, dissemination of false information to cause fear, and conspiracy. Saab has said, and armed forces are traditionally the arbiter of political disputes in Venezuela, and they've shown no sign of ditching Maduro, even in the face of credible evidence. credible evidence presented by the opposition that it trounced the self-proclaimed socialists at the polls by a more than 2-to-1 margin. Gonzalez and Machado called on rank-and-file members of the security forces to rethink their loyalty to Maduro. Authorities have declared Maduro the victor in last Sunday's election, but have yet to produce voting tallies to prove he won. The opposition claims to have collected records from more than 80% of the 30,000 polling booths nationwide, showing it won. You're watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We'll be back shortly after this break. Please stay tuned.
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on sport news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN. From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring all sport news.
Welcome back to the broadcast of the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We are open for advert placements, bookings, and commercials, and you can connect with us and watch us on our ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube, Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok, Atlantic TV Network 1, on X, formerly Twitter, Atlantic TV Net, or watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. And now, to the rest of our stories. A key organizer of Bangladesh's students' protest said Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus was their choice as the head of an interim government a day after longtime Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina resigned. The country's figurehead president and the military chief said Monday that an interim government will be formed soon. Nahid Islam, the organizer, in a video post in social media, said the students' protest leaders have already talked with Yunus, who consented to take over considering the present situation of the country. Yunus, who called Hasina's resignation the country's second liberation day, faced a number of corruption accusations and was put on trial during the former prime minister's rule. He received the Nobel in 2006 after he pioneered microlending, and he said that the corruption charges against him were motivated by vengeance. Islam said that the student protesters would announce more names for the government, and it would be a difficult challenge for the current leadership to ignore their choices. Hasina resigned and fled the country on Monday after weeks of protests against a quota system for government jobs descended into violence and grew into a broader challenge to her 15-year rule. Thousands of demonstrators stormed her official residence and other buildings associated with her party and family. Her departure threatened to create an even more instability in the densely populated South Asian nation that is already dealing with a series of crises, from high unemployment to corruption to climate change. Amid security concerns, the main airport in Dhaka, the capital, suspended operations. Violence just before and after her resignation left at least 109 people dead and hundreds of others injured, according to media reports, which could not be independently confirmed. More than a dozen were reportedly killed when protesters set fire to a hotel owned by a leader in Hasina's party in southwestern town of Jashore. More violence at Savar, just outside Dhaka. At least 25 people died, the report said. Another 10 people died in Dhaka's Uttura neighborhood. United Nations said on Monday that it has fired additional staff members from its agency for Palestinian refugees after an internal investigation found that they may have been involved in the Hamas-led October 7th attack against Israel. The United Nations Secretary General's office announced the move in a brief statement to journalists, and Farhan Haq, deputy spokesman for the Secretary General, did not elaborate on UNRWA staffers' likely role in the attack or on the evidence that prompted this decision. UNRWA previously fired 12 staffers and put 7 staffers on administrative leave without pay over the claims. The group of 9 staffers the United Nations announced it had fired on Monday includes some from each group, said Juliet Tuma, the communications director for UNRWA. The United Nations did not clarify how many have now been fired from the agency in total. The United Nations internal watchdog has been investigating the agency since Israel in January accused 12 UNRWA staff of being involved in the October 7th attack on Israel, in which militants killed 1,200 people and abducted some 250 others. Israel's allegations initially led top donor countries to suspend their funding for UNRWA, and that caused a cash crunch of about $450 million. Since then, all donor countries, except for the U.S., have decided to resume funding. Oren Mamostein, the spokesperson for Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, wrote on X following the announcement of the findings that Israel was again calling for donor countries to suspend funding as the funds may go to the terrorist elements. Hundreds of Israelis sent orange balloons into the air Monday to mark the 5th birthday of one of the 2 children held captive by militants in the Gaza Strip. Ariel Bibas, along with his 1-year-old brother, Kefir, has become a symbol of the struggle to release the hostages. The orange balloons are meant to symbolize Ariel and Kefir's bright red hair. During its October 7th attack, Hamas killed 1,200 people and took some 250 people hostage, according to Israeli authorities. Among the 110 still held hostage, the Bibas boys are said to be the only children, and Israeli authorities say more than a third of the remaining hostages are no longer alive, though Israel does not consider the Bibas boys to be part of that tally. Ariel Bibas' relatives said that they were stunned to be marking the birthday while Ariel is still in captivity 304 days after he was kidnapped. Ariel, Kefir, and the parents, Shiri and Yarden Bibas, were kidnapped from kibbutz near Oz on October the 7th. Video of the kidnapping with Shiril seen swaddling her 2 red-haired boys in a blanket and being whisked away by armed men reached around the world in the hours after the attack. In January, family members marked what they dubbed the saddest birthday in the world as Kefir turned 1-year-old. Keshet said that he believed that there were major differences between how Kefir and Ariel were experiencing their time in captivity. On Monday, hundreds of supporters gathered in Tel Aviv to march with the photos of Ariel wearing Batman costumes. He loved all the superheroes and Batman especially, said relative Jimmy Miller, who wore a shirt with Batman on it in Ariel's honor. He showed a picture of a beaming Ariel and at his nursery school before his kidnapping with a photo he drew of the Batman symbol. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused social media platforms of digital fascism on Monday for allegedly censoring photographs of Palestinian martyrs. The Turkish leader's comments came as Turkish officials were engaged in discussions with representatives of the social media platform Instagram to reinstate access to millions of its users in Turkey. The Information and Communications Technology authorities barred access to Instagram on August 2nd without providing a reason. Government officials say the ban was imposed because Instagram failed to abide by Turkish regulations. Several media reports said, however, that the action was in response to Instagram removing posts by Turkish users that expressed condolences over the killing of Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh. It was the latest instance of a clampdown on websites in the country, which has a track record of censoring social media and other online platforms. They cannot even tolerate photographs of Palestinian martyrs and immediately ban them, Erdogan said at a human rights event. we are confronted with a digital fascism that is disguised as freedom. Unlike its Western allies, Turkey does not consider Hamas a terror organization. A strong critic of Israel's military actions in Gaza, Erdogan has described the group as a liberation force and movement. Erdogan went on to state that social media websites were allegedly allowing all kinds of propaganda by groups considered terrorists in Turkey. We have tried to establish a line of dialogue through our relevant institutions. However, we have not yet been able to achieve the desired cooperation, Erdogan said. The Transportation and Infrastructure Minister, Abdul Kadir Uraloglu, said that Turkish authorities had met with representatives of Meta-owned company last week and held a fresh round of talks on Monday without reaching a resolution. Instagram has more than 57 million users in Turkey, a nation of 85 million people, according to We Are Social Media, a digital marketing news company based in New York. The Electronic Commerce Operators Association estimates that Instagram and other social media platforms per day generate about 930 million Turkish lira, that is about $27 million worth of e-commerce. Director of an exhibition park showcasing Russia's military might was arrested on fraud charges along with a top defense ministry official, part of a sweeping investigation into abuse of office in the top echelons of the military leadership. Vyacheslav Akhmedov, head of the Patriot Park, sometimes called Russia's military Disneyland, and Major General Vladimir Shesterov, deputy of the Defense Ministry's Innovations Department, were detained, Russia's investigative committee said on Monday. The committee, Russia's top criminal investigation agency, said the two are suspected of embezzling government funds earmarked for the park, which opened in 2015, and Patriot Park features display of weaponry and serves as a venue for their demonstration and battle reenactments. The sprawling facility also includes an air base along with a firing range, museums, a conference center, and even has a Russian Orthodox cathedral devoted to the armed forces on its 5,400 hectares. The park, a pet project of former defense minister Sergei Shoigu, is designed to inspire patriotism in Russia's younger generations. The Patriarch Kirill in 2020 consecrated the massive khaki-colored Cathedral of the Russian Armed Forces, which features mosaics of Soviet and Russian soldiers, and Russian President Vladimir Putin also personally donated money to commission the main icon of the church, according to the Kremlin. The detention of Akhmedov and Shesterov follows a series of arrests of senior military officials who were part of the inner circle of Shoigu, dismissed by Putin soon after his inauguration in May to a sixth term. Shoigu, who had personal ties to Putin, was given the high-profile post of Secretary of Russia's Security Council, but several members of his entourage lost their jobs, and many of them were arrested, including top associates and Deputy Timur Ivanov, who was jailed on bribery charges in April. Shoigu had been widely criticized for Russia's setbacks on the battlefield in Ukraine and was accused of incompetence and corruption by mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, who launched a brief mutiny in June 2023 to demand his dismissal. European Union on Monday slapped sanctions on 28 officials accused of human rights violations in Belarus and links to the ongoing crackdown against opponents of authoritarian President Alexander Lukashenko, in a move just ahead of the anniversary of disputed 2020 elections that brought Lukashenko to power. The EU said it had frozen the assets of prosecutors and judges who have issued politically motivated sentences. They were also banned from traveling in the 27-nation bloc. Others targeted included senior officials of the Belarus Interior Ministry's Department for Combating Organized Crime and Corruption as well as top officials at some of the country's prisons and alleged regime propagandists working in the media. The EU said the ministerial department is one of the main bodies responsible for political persecution in Belarus, including arbitrary and unlawful arrest and ill treatment, including torture of activists and members of civil society. Last Thursday, 2 Belarusian journalists working for news outlets that the government has declared extremists were handed prison sentences in a closed-door trial, the latest in a persistent crackdown on dissent and independent journalism. The repression began as a huge protest broke out in response to the disputed August 9, 2020 presidential election that gave Lukashenko a 6th term in office. The EU insists that the poll was fraudulent. More than 35,000 people have been arrested in the crackdown. Many prominent opposition figures have fled the country and others have been sentenced to long prison terms. The rights group Vyasna says that there are nearly 1,400 political prisoners currently in Belarus. The EU said in a statement that it stands with the people of Belarus and unwaveringly supports the Belarusian people and their quest for free, democratic, sovereign and independent Belarus as part of a free and peaceful Europe. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said on Monday that a standing army of specialist police will be set up to deal with rioting, that the justice system will be ramped up to handle hundreds of arrests after violent disorders rocked cities across the nation over the past week. Starmer convened an urgent meeting after lawlessness he blamed on far-right thuggery that was driven in part by misinformation on social media that whipped up anger over a stabbing rampage at a dance class that killed 3 girls and wounded 10 people. False rumors spread online that the suspect was a Muslim asylum seeker led to attacks on migrants and immigrants and mosques. Whatever the apparent motivation, this is not protest. It is pure violence, and we will not tolerate attacks on mosques or our Muslim communities, Starmer said. The full force of the law will be visited on all those who are identified as having taken part in these activities. On Sunday, angry mobs attacked 2 hostels used to house asylum seekers, breaking windows and lighting fires before police dispersed the crowds and residents were evacuated. Dozens of police officers have been hospitalized for injuries in the past 6 days after being struck with bricks, bottles, and large wooden posts. More than 375 people have been arrested in the mayhem so far, and more are expected, the National Police Chiefs Council said. Many made court appearances on Monday and found themselves facing at least several weeks behind bars awaiting their next court hearing. Former federal Liberal Minister Philip Ruddock has claimed property developers supported by people within his own party were behind a professional campaign to oust him as mayor of Sydney's Hornsby Shire Council. The 81-year-old will not contest the mayorship at September's New South Wales local government elections after losing a pre-selection ballot to Liberal Councillor Warren Waddell by 60 votes on Monday. The New South Wales Liberal leader, Mark Speakman, dismissed Ruddock's claim but paid tribute to his exemplary service as a giant of the Liberal Party. Ruddock on Tuesday claimed that the campaign to remove him had been managed by developers who wanted to rezone and build on Hornsby's semi-rural suburbs even before there was adequate infrastructure in the place to support additional homes. Speakman, who was in the area on Tuesday morning with the Liberal candidate for the upcoming by-elections state electoral of Hornsby, refuted Ruddock's claims. This is not a vote of some of the development lobby group. This is a vote of members here in Hornsby. It's a democratic process and I respect the outcome, he said. Ruddock's successor, Waddell, is one of the 3 councillors on Hornsby's council representing Ward A, which encompasses Dural and other semi-rural areas in the north of the local government area on Sydney's northern fringe, and Ruddock, whose 50-year-old career in public life included serving as immigration minister in the Howard government, said that he was obviously very disappointed. Ruddock entered federal parliament in 1973, representing the seat of Parramatta, and served as a Liberal MP for 43 years. He was elected as mayor of Hornsby Shire in 2017, the year after he retired from federal parliament. The Means Labour government is targeting Hornsby as one of the areas it has earmarked for increased development, with the rezoning around existing train station under its transport-oriented development policy. However, Ruddock said that the TOD was irrelevant to the campaign to oust him. The Premier, Chris Minns, on Tuesday said Ruddock had been a good partner with the government in pushing for sensible planning and density in Hornsby. And that's the size of the international news for today. Before we go, another look at the major stories. In Niger, United States hands over last military base to government. And in United States, VP Kamala Harris to introduce running mates. In Israel, hundreds celebrate the birthday of captive child. And in Belgium, EU sanctions Belarus officials for rights violation. And in Australia, government rebukes Iranian ambassador. I am Raymond Ken Mbata. Thank you for watching, and do well to follow us on our social media handles: X, formerly Twitter, Atlantic TV Net; Facebook and YouTube, Atlantic Television Network; Instagram and TikTok, Atlantic TV Network. And watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. Peace and unity are the pathways to progress.